to do stuff, so they would rather go and hire a banker from another institution than train their staff on what they need to do to go and conduct commerce in the world today. And my last beef is M1 money supply has gone up 75% in 13 months.
Love it.
I don't think people have gone and really wrapped their head around it. It's not showing up with the typical consumer because it's still showing primarily there as a security for the banks to avoid going into default. So that's my rant.
Well, you know, only thing I'm going to say, Taimour, is there's a lot more money. Bank of England's pumping money like crazy. God bless the Fed in the U.S. are pumping money, and then our Canadian central bank has just increased it. I think, Edgar, was it like 200% last year, or something insane?
Yeah.
So hence I tell people, why are you shocked your house has gone up 25% in a pandemic? That money is out there. I mean, it's inflation, you know, and people. So hence, you know, that's for the real estate side, but I say for the business side, that's where we have to really, again, I agree with you a lot, Edward, systems, but also, you know, you're right. Staff in these banks, people assume they're geniuses. They have MBAs, CFAs, CPAs, law degrees, like Carlos say. They assume they're just geniuses. And I tell you, it's like, you literally almost have to educate the employees. Is that not correct, Edgar? Like, you have to almost it's you can legally do this. You can legally do that. You know, you have to almost ask them, you know, in a Socratic method, like, can you legally do this? Yes. Can you legally do this? Yes. Oh, and they don't even know this. And I look at them saying, how do you not know in your bank screens, like, this is what you can do? And yet you work here. And it's funny because I would say RBC is the best bank. That's just my humble opinion in Canada. But other than that, I find, it's just, you have to almost go international. You have to have guys like Carlos who understand the legal side, but also how to do it. You have to have guys like William, you have to have guys like Rob who, you know, come from that private equity background and understand different aspects. Because, you know, you almost need like a strong team going in now, because, you know, you just go to your local couple of banks and then they say no. And you're like, oh, I was told I can't do it because I spoke to my advisor and the business development guy at the bank, and he said no. And then I went up higher and they say no. And you have to almost go up so high up in the system and that's kind of where we come in, right?
Rob, you just nailed it there. And going and speaking, where I would say we're also in this hyper specialized world. Business owners no longer are served by the banks on how they can get their goal achieved.
Thank you.
That's, I think, the dilemma, and it's primarily because that expertise has aged out into senior roles. It's become extremely administrative, and also the business people, like, look, how many times does a business owner actually need to go and get financing versus how many times they want to go and get financing? They want to go 0 times. They need to go way more frequently. So you have the outsourcing of financing and capital raise going to specialist organizations who ironically are led by former senior bankers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this generational gap, and I'm really worried where this is going to go and show up, because as you've gotten, you know, you're much more familiar with these financial instruments that you participate in daily. I'm telling you, I can't even get a Canadian and most American institutions to wrap their head around the security options that are available. And they're like, oh, this might be something with the transaction being of a certain size, of a certain nature. They're not even trained in how to go and respond to these. It's like, I haven't heard of it.
So Edgar, you know this is true. If I brought in a $50 million SBLC, I know who you bank with. If I brought it to your bank here in, let's say, Canada, you know the bank, that thing sits there. It doesn't go anywhere.
Oh, no, they have no idea what to do with it.
See, thank you.
My
mentor said to me, he said to me, don't bring any instruments into Canada. And I said, what do you mean? He's like, don't try it. And somebody I know personally tried to bring a $50 million instrument to Scotiabank Toronto at Yonge and King.
Oh, good luck.
I know, thank you. So, and they were told, don't do it in Canada, bring it offshore. And they're like, no, but I want to bring it here because I bank with them and I know them, but I can go downtown. And I said, and the guy said, don't do it. And you know what happened? They got called into the bank. They got that call, and they were told, what the hell is this? Where'd this come from? And it was like, 100 questions. And they were like, but it's a SBLC and it's cash back and I'm doing it for this project. And here's the documents and everything. And the bankers like treat them like a criminal. And they were warned. And the guy said, I told you, like, why would you try? The system is not designed to do it. And he said, that's why you go to Europe. You go to, William knows this better, Singapore, Asia, offshore, Cayman, like you have to go there. And that's why when I tell people, like, it's a whole different world. But then, when they assume, well, it's not that much money because you try to do, let's say, a real estate developer in a project, I said, that's where you have to bring in your legal team and everything and structure it. And it's all structure and systems. And you almost have to get financial engineering. I mean, my father is a civil engineer, but you have to have that engineering brain on almost, right?
But I just want to say, I know a lot of senior executives of banks on a first name basis. Like I know their wife and kids like that. One of the things that bigger banks are seriously worried about, is innovation, and specifically disruptive innovation. In Canada, our largest bank by far is a bank called Royal Bank. And Royal Bank invested, to their credit, they invested in something called RBC Ventures. And it has its own CEO. And RBC Ventures physically has to operate as a separate bank outside of RBC, so it doesn't inherit any of the cultures of RBC. But RBC is not alone. I know people, like I know a guy called Neil Oswald, former senior vice president of CIBC. He was tasked with reinventing the bank outside of the bank. Like these banks, like, what is it that's not working is my question, because they're spending hundreds and millions of dollars. So some freaking app like Wealthsimple doesn't disrupt their wealth management business, which it is.
Well, Taimour, do you want to? I'm going to send you a little clip here yesterday that was on I call it Money Twitter. But gentlemen, something's off where Edgar, do you hear about what HSBC did to HSBC investors yesterday in Canada?
I don't. But I'm happy to listen.
So you're familiar with the MicroStrategy playbook, where where all these public companies are buying Bitcoin under their Treasury reserve strategy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you know how if I wanted to make a lot of money in crypto without going on Coinbase, I just buy MicroStrategy, Riot, all these crypto blockchain stocks, right? Because that's the best way for institutional money to go in. Well, guess what HSBC Canada specifically did? You're no longer allowed to buy any more MicroStrategy stock in your HSBC investor account.
Are you allowed to buy Coinbase?
I don't even want to check. I know it's going to go up 10x. Well, I mean, Rob probably knows better than I do what it probably could do. But I think, it's funny. MicroStrategy, which got Elon, God bless him, richest guy in the world, engineer, to do that strategy, they will not let you, as a Canadian at HSBC, take your money and buy the stock of MicroStrategy.
Oh yeah, there's a weird thing in Ontario, and I don't know who's going and leading this. I was not allowed to participate in a California private placement because I'm a resident of Ontario.
Oh God.
We were in the same restricted geographies as Congo, Iran, several other blacklisted CIA countries.
And you know why that is, Edgar. And I said this. I said this to Taimour. It's because if you do the math, and I mean, Rob is the expert on this, but I personally think you see the 2017 like gains where it goes up 10x, 100x, and I think they're like, we don't want people taking their cash and going into stock and going into this thing and making a ton of. I think they just figured there'll be a stampede. You know what happened with GameStop a few months ago?
Yeah. Oh,
I don't know
that was a really good short squeeze pull.
Yeah, and I don't know the full. I know most of it, but I mean, Carlos probably knows better than I do. But I was told that it was just open season to take that thing down with Melbourne Capital. But imagine if you have it where, you do the math. There's going to be endless lockdowns. You do 5 stimuluses, $10 trillion pumped into Canada, the U.S., Europe, and you take 5% of that money and it goes into these stocks and certain ventures and Coinbase. And what do you think would happen to the bank's balance sheets, and what would happen? It would disrupt everything so rapidly that I figured HSBC is doing it. Something's happening because they changed the regulation here in Ontario that you have to almost go offshore to Barbados, Bahamas, because I think they just don't want people getting too rich too fast. I really have this feeling that they're clamping down because the banks fear. How are you going to stop it? There's so many ways to go around, like just to indirectly do it, that if they're saying you can't buy a stock of a public company, like I can't buy a stock in HSBC. Why is that? Like I'm making money. The clients are making money. Don't you want them to make money and get richer? And it's like, no, sorry, you can't. Stay in the bank, make 2%, right? It's like, it's just, I found that fascinating because it was all over the internet. And it was only Canada. It wasn't the US.
Yeah, I was on a I was on a call with a bank yesterday, and I'm gonna just really obfuscate a lot, so I don't want to risk my violation of confidentiality. But the lead credit analyst went and acknowledged that they are 10 years behind Australia
What?
on
jeez.
the adoption of digital adjudication in the Canadian credit system.
Wow.
We couldn't even set up a data room with the bank. And we need to, because all of the files that we're sharing are encrypted because of confidentiality protocols. So what we are now going and doing it is, if you can believe it, is we're compressing everything into one giant PDF file and having Adobe encrypt it, theoretically in Canada, and then going and emailing it to them because they can open PDF files.
I want to ask a question here. I want to talk about qualifying opportunities. I remember William could testify, when I first met him, I was going to him with, I don't want to use the word junk leads, but it was like, hey, William, here's a client. He wants X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And then William had to be very generous. His colleague Caesar out of Singapore also had to be very generous with the time to train me. Hey, this is not a documentary of credit, or this is what you need to look for, like that. My question is, I myself get a lot of, I don't want to use the word junk leads, but a lot of brokers in my network that come to me with what they think are valid opportunities, but they're not valid opportunities. It's what I would call a junk lead. And then I spend time on that opportunity with that broker, because I know how important it is for them to get funded for their clients so they can get paid. And then something's off with the transaction. Like either the paperwork was fraudulent, or the client was working with 5 other brokers at the same time, or something changed in the life of the client. And then there's always 5 brokers in between, so the communication gets lost. My question for this table is, how do we get better at qualifying opportunities? Rob, I'm going to start with you. When I say Rob, I mean Rob Thompson. I'm going to start with you, because I bet you a lot of people call you and say, hey, I want to go into a private placement program. And if I had a camera counting the number of emails, calls you get versus number of people that actually go into a private placement program, it's a big proportion that just simply don't make it. So my question is, how do we get better at qualifying opportunities? What are some questions maybe we should be asking that we're not asking? Or what are some things we should be looking for that we're not looking for? Like that.
Yeah, sure. Is my audio okay this time?
It is.
Okay, great. So one of the platform officers I work with, he expressed the numbers this way. He said in a good year, he'll get 1,000 files coming in, each over 100 million. And if 3 go into trade, then it's been a good year. That's the kind of percentages that at the platform level they get. And as an intermediary or an intake representative working with a platform, I don't send them all the files that I get, obviously. And you don't send me all the files that you get either. And what I've learned is the best thing to do is say cash is king. If it's cash in a top tier bank, let's talk. If it's not, then I want to put you on the back burner so I can keep my deal flow open for those that do meet that elite criteria. Not everybody has 100 million cash at the bank. I understand that. Second to cash is MTNs. I haven't seen very many files with MTN as a source of funds or proof of funds. So the next to that is SBLCs and bank guarantees. So one key is to figure out, is this a leased SBLC or bank guarantee, or is it owned? If it's owned and it's a top tier bank, you can move forward with it. If it's leased, it's just a waste of time. So most of the times you'll notice that the files are coming in, if it's not within those 3 categories, cash from a top tier bank, MTN or BG/SBLC that's owned, then put everything else on the back burner. What I've seen happen a lot is people come in with all these, I call it shiny thing syndrome, all these one-off deals that look interesting, but they're off. They're not those three main categories. And they say, can you do this? Can you do that? And the standard answer has to be, get me a full complete KYC and then I can look at it, because it depends. Most of the time when people are just shopping for a really exotic transaction, they don't even have a full package of information, so you can even look at the details to figure out if there is a way to make it work or not. So when sorting through files coming through intermediaries or brokers, by saying, give me a complete package before I can tell you if I can do it or not, that helps get rid of 90%. Because if you with limited information, try to make it work, check your sources, and then you ask for the KYC, they don't give it to you anyways, because they weren't direct to the client anyhow. And so it was just a waste of time. So in terms of time management and deal flow, saying no to the 90% of really exotic things that don't have a KYC frees up time, so you can have the availability to allocate the resources and attention to the three mainstay categories: cash is king, MTN deals, SBLC, or BG. Those are essentially the same kind of instrument that are owned, not leased. If someone, here's a tricky one, if someone's a beneficiary of an SBLC, doesn't mean that they're the owner of the SBLC. In order for that SBLC to be able to get monetized, they're still going to have to get the owner of the SBLC to agree to it. So if they're just a beneficiary of the SBLC, that's a good clue that it's leased. It's not always the case, but it's a good clue that it's simply a leased SBLC. But I've had a lot of people tell me it's owned, but it ended up being leased when you just look at the documentation in the package. If they can give you a full KYC, it's simply taking the time to read the document. And the document will tell you what it really is. I almost never take the word of the intermediary as to what the deal is when they send me the deal, because they're usually wrong. And when you look at the documentation, it's usually slightly different than what that intermediary thought it was. Hope that helps.
Can I add to this? Oh,
Yeah.
you're on mute, Taimour, I think.
Sorry, Edgar. You got. Just go ahead.
All right, thanks. So Taimour, is this a appropriate time for me to share a little bit about what we're doing with you?
100%.
Okay. All right, great. So one of the things that we're doing at Avasta is, because we're in the whole business value management and measurement space, we've gone and taken that expertise, in addition to contributing it to a new US standard for measurement and value reporting. It's going into public review later this year. It's been 5 years in development. We're actually coming out with what I would call is the, if you're familiar in banking with the acid test, we're coming out with the acid test version. And that's going to be one of the requirements in this new product that Taimour is making available from lineofcredit.ai that's insurance backed. The applicant actually has to pass the business value and risk assessment that we've gone and developed. It's off the back of the standard. And it goes and identifies how legitimate is the business's security as well as their business prospects. And it gets into the legal side, the financial side, the litigation side as a formal checklist. If they cannot pass that checklist, it is an unfundable deal without crossing ethical boundaries. So we're making that capability available as part of those transactions. And the applicant has to answer all of those questions to a certain degree of satisfaction, or the red and yellow flags come up. And if it's just a question of, oh, well, we haven't gone and registered this asset formally, that's fine, you've acknowledged it. But if they actually don't have any process in place to register or put a recognition of premium value on their asset, then for Taimour's point of view, is we'll go and say, look, this is a dirty deal, or this is an insufficiently thought out deal in terms of this company being able to meet their growth objectives or their ability to go and make a credible acquisition that they're looking for financing for. So that toolkit is available from Avasta to make it happen. We're now in the process of further formalizing it and making it available to mostly in the M&A due diligence space as well. in addition to what Taimour is using it in qualifying his own credit requests that are coming in for high leverage or leveraged M&A transactions.
That's
Awesome.
a good idea. You know, that in the past, when we evaluate the transactions, we are consistently seeking for the subsidized or the supporting platform that can help us to do the compliance check. So my recommendations to join with those transactions, Rob pretty much cover everything, but I would like to add on top of this is you definitely need to have the opportunity to have a conference call with applicants and having the word with him, asking the several questions, which is when I working as a compliance officer for my statutory trust, there's a ton, probably 10 plus the questions that we need to randomly asking the applicant or the beneficiary. And it is very easily to assist us to define are they really legitimate party or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So without dialogue with the principal or the applicant, you know, you're not gonna get the things done.
And that's what we're
For sure.
proposing is having that checklist approach actually be a requirement for the application, because we're able to run the algorithms in the background of the dependencies based on commercial, legal, financial, or structural criteria. If they're not, if there's a yellow or red flag, then in this case, Taimour or with our M&A partners, the M&A partners are able to know that they're going to run into an issue in the deal, either trying to sell the company or trying to buy the company.